Welcome to another Online Personals Watch interview. I'm joined by Scott Lewallen, who is the co-founder and Senior Vice President of Product and Design for Grindr and Blender. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So we interviewed Joel a while back, and he gave us the scoop on the founding story. And so I'm really intrigued to hear your side of the story and how you did so much with so little. You started with $5,000. And how did you do it?
So you heard all that magic, $5,000, all self-funded, that sort of thing. I think the behind-the-scenes part that's very exciting for any startup is there were a lot of tireless nights where we didn't sleep. There was a lot of scribbling on napkins and pieces of paper, and some brainstorming in Photoshop and other sort of drawing programs. But it basically came down to I had met Joel when I lived in New York. I moved back to Los Angeles, and he showed up one day in LA and said, "You know what? I'm going to try out Los Angeles, and I've got this idea. I want to be able to meet the gay guys around me. What do you think? Do you want to help me?" And I was like, "Oh, sure, that's a great idea." And I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
So your background is branding.
My background is branding, art, and also technology. I'm a big geek, so as much as I love art, I also love technology, and there's a natural fusion there together, especially with graphic design and app building.
At what stage did you realize that this was not going to be a small thing? This is going to be a big company, and you're going to millions of users. At what stage did you realize it was going to take off?
When Joel first came to me with the idea, I knew we were on to something. I mean, it seemed like a natural idea, a perfect fit, the perfect time and place. But I'm the perpetual skeptic. Is this really going to work? And even when we launched it, obviously there was some immediate press and excitement just in the local gay community here in Los Angeles. But I think the first time it dawned on me that we'd hit something really big is about a month later. There was a big party in Palm Springs called the White Party, and it's a big sort of gay event. And I noticed that when I got there to sort of promote and represent and introduce Grindr to people who had no idea what it was, people were actually using it already. So the sort of ball had begun rolling, and we had the magical viral word of mouth thing, or the phenomenon happening there. So, there was never, even to this day, I don't take anything for granted, but as I saw the numbers, the user base rise, and also the time of interaction that each person was spending on Grindr daily kept going up and up and up and not really ever going down, that's when I knew that we had something really big.
So let's talk about virality. There's two sides to virality, right? First thing is be interesting, have something worth talking about. And
Right.
the second thing is helping that process along, making it easy for people to talk. How did you make it easy for people to talk and spread the word?
I think if you look at the Grindr app and the experience, it is very basic. I purposely tried not to introduce complicated methods of getting from point A to point B. And the overarching goal of Grindr is that I am a gay man, and I'm trying to find gay men around me to speak to. And the mechanism in the app is literally a photo grid of people around you. And once you look at those people's profiles, you can then message them. So I think keeping the experience very basic helped us infinitely because it solved a problem. Figure out who's gay, and then break the ice so you can talk to them.
So tell us more about LBS. You've done it right. How have you done it right?
I think we've done it right in that it solved one single problem, finding out who's gay around you, and letting the app do that for you so it's a transparent tool. You're not launching Grindr to say, oh, this is a cool location technology. You're launching Grindr to find the people that you're looking for around you, and the location is that transparent window into doing that. So I'm sure most of our users don't open it up and say, oh, this is location based. What a great way to use it. All they care about is, hey, I'm able to talk to that guy that might be a few blocks away from me.
Because other apps have actually used a map, like Singles Around Me.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that
The app phenomenon, I've seen it used in a number of places, and some people have done it brilliantly, and some people have not. But with regards to Grindr, it isn't really about finding that person on the map. That's interesting, but what's more interesting is what you have to say to the person and what they have to say back. I mean, you're interested in their photo and their stats, and it doesn't really matter where they are on the map. if you know they're 500 feet away, you know that could be 500 feet north or south or east or west.
So how have you used what you've learned from Grindr in Blender, and what have been the challenges?
In Blender, obviously, the magic of our simple interface and the location-based services were very important to us. The challenge with Blender is the entire world ready for this type of technology and this phenomenon? And with Blender, it's not just gay males, it's mainstream, it's everybody. It's straight, gay, female, male. And we questioned whether or not there was critical mass. Would the women come to play? Because it's clear that the gay men are interested in this type of thing, and possibly straight men would be interested in this, but were women really ready for this? And what we found is that it's picked up pretty well, and that people are very engaged on Blender as well. That being said, our significant user base and our critical mass is certainly on Grindr, because again, it solves a basic problem.
Do you think you would move Blender more towards the Badoo direction, friends making, if you like, finding new friends?
I do have some cool statistics here. We did poll our Blender users quite recently, and the number that came back to us was over 90% of both male and female Blender users are using it to talk with new people. And what does that mean? Talking with new people essentially means dating or flirting. So people are going on Blender, regardless of their gender, and they're engaging Blender to flirt with people. So I think what we found is, we're 9 months into this. Blender has been on the market for quite some time. And after sort of watching our user habits and seeing what they're doing, we've begun to push it in more of a dating and flirting direction instead of just social discovery.
Do you think anyone's in the dating sphere, the iDating sphere, has gotten social right? Meaning, has anybody, beyond just connecting in and pulling in the information from Facebook to create a profile, do you think anybody's really got social graph right?
Social graph? Well,
meaning, do they, friends date friends of friends? This is actually one of the reasons Friendster started, by the way. Jonathan Abrams, when he started Friendster, he said, well, internet dating's cheesy. He's going to create something that's more natural. You meet people to date through your friends of friends at parties, etc. There's sort of kind of two schools of thought, I think. There's one school of thought that says, well, that's not cool because that's should be a separate group, and you don't want to mix that world. But in the real world, the reality is people meet through their friends of friends. What's your philosophy on this, and how does Blender blend that in?
Well, I think it's applicable to both Blender and Grindr and just the social sphere in general. But you look at it, and there are a few different buckets. There's the social bucket, right? And then there's the dating bucket. And I feel that there's so many options out there that service both of these buckets and overlap at some points, because not everybody wants a single solution that serves both buckets. So people who are more into dating, maybe they don't want to show the social aspect of their lives or their profiles. Or if they're purely on it for social networking and talking to friends, maybe they don't want to mix that pool with the dating aspect. So I do sort of see it as two distinct buckets, and I'm not quite sure anybody has done it right in combining the two, though certainly people have tried. But I think if you look at some of the successes, look at Badoo and their sort of dating format, it's very impressive, and people are on there, it would appear to be, for flirting and dating, whereas Facebook, it's more about social proof and talking to people that you already know, not so much flirting with the people who you don't know, because it might be creepy. I'm not sure.
Could you define social proof?
Social proof for me is when I go and I'm investigating somebody and something in their profile, whether it's an obvious mutual connection or a mutual friend, or just some event they've been to that I know about, it qualifies them in my mind that, hey, I might be able to talk to this person and they're not completely crazy. So maybe we could hang out, grab a beer, maybe I could go on a date with this person, or maybe that it's just cool to talk to them because they know 10 other people I went to school with.
So what do you think is the future? Do you think do you think these two buckets should be separate, really? Do you think the money is in a particular bucket, in the future, in terms of monetization?
I'm not sure. I personally flip-flop back and forth, because in my personal usage patterns, it bugs me that I have to open 5 or 6 different apps to achieve what I want to do online. It would be nice to do that from a single location. But at the same time, if there was that single solution, would I want all those different aspects of my personal life to sort of smear together?
Are we getting more complicated, do you think, or simpler? In terms of the way we're growing as human beings. I mean, we're becoming more faceted, if you like. I mean, more sophisticated as well, in some ways. So, do you think that's going to result in us having more apps or less apps to
Uh,
achieve that?
I think, I mean, if you look at the apps trending right now, it seems that what happens is an app launches, it's wildly successful, so much to the point where they inject all kinds of features, and then users lose sight of the basic problem that was solved for them when they started using the app. If you look at Instagram, which I'm a huge fan of, Instagram services, sharing photos in a social atmosphere, and it does it so basically. There have been countless other sort of social photo type sharing apps out there, and Instagram kept it very basic. I mean, you certainly can customize your photos and play with them, but at the end of the day, you're basically capturing a moment in time, sharing that with people you know and possibly people who want to know you, and then creating a small dialogue on that particular moment in time. And so, in terms of complexity, I think a lot of the new compelling apps that are coming out there, certainly the ones that I like to download and play with, are the ones that are not so heavy in their UI that you don't know what the purpose is. It's the apps and the experience that solve a single problem and let you interact with it with a few taps of a few buttons, not diving into 10 levels of menus and settings.
On the subject of social media, have you
Mhm.
found that you've got more results from particular channels? Um, I was just talking to someone about Pinterest
Mhm.
and possibly using that to help grow some interest and define the brand that they have in their dating company. So, I mean, how do you use Pinterest, for example? How do you use Facebook? What's your thoughts on using social media to generate interest in dating companies?
Um, I guess I would say maybe can you be more specific about the question, but let me talk about Pinterest for a second because I think it's really cool. I personally haven't found much use for Pinterest for myself because when I go on there, it seems a lot of females are gravitating towards Pinterest, and there's a lot of chatter about wedding gowns and salons and shopping things. Uh, so it seems like there's a lot of female engagement on there. That said, I think the team behind Pinterest is brilliant. The UI is so simple and it's so visual. People want to see stuff, they don't want to read stuff, and therefore they've succeeded in both the desktop and the mobile experience. It's very exciting.
So how does Grindr use social media to generate word of mouth
You within the app or externally?
externally?
Externally, Grinder. We've been lucky in that our users are fiercely loyal, and therefore people talk about Grinder regardless of our efforts to market it outside the app. We've got a pretty big following on Twitter, also on Facebook. But people, Grinder is part of the gay lexicon and also part of just mainstream media. We've had countless press mentions both in New York Times, TechCrunch, mainstream publications like that, and also pop culture. One of our big moments was when Stephen Fry mentioned us in his program and basically introduced Grindr to the masses, especially in the UK. And then quite recently, we had two mentions here in the US. We were mentioned on Saturday Night Live, and we were also mentioned on the TV show The Office. And I'm a fan of both of those. So, when that happens, there's this element of people either know about Grindr already or don't know about it and hear it and go out and discover it. So again, it's the sort of viral organic process of hitting social media, not just online, but social media in general, where people find that Grindr is a very cool social phenomenon and rally around it.
How difficult was it to come up with a name?
Oh my gosh. The name Grindr came from my brainstorming process is very organic. My desk piles up with tons of papers that have chicken scratch and colors and scribbling all over them. And then the desktop of my computer has just layers and layers of files that I then group together in a single folder called Brainstorm. So the word grinder came out of weeks and weeks of just looking at words, looking at concepts. I wanted to find a very visceral, sort of edgy word that would encapsulate the gay community and also the aspect of social media and coming together and interacting. So Joel and I It happened in Hollywood night at this at a Chinese restaurant, the Huanan Cafe, and I had a list of maybe 50 words, and we just kept circling them and doing different iterations of each word, and we eventually ended up on the word grinder. And that night we said, I think this is it. And as with any decision we make, we sort of take a step back to see the forest and not get stuck among the trees. And by the next day, we were like, the word grinder, that just embodies what we're trying to go for here. And we think it's a unique word. It's short, it rolls off your tongue, and it's memorable. And in that, we found what ultimately became the product we have now.
And what would be your advice to someone who's just starting out and thinking, well, I want to grow something for my particular dating community online on mobile phone? How would you recommend they start? How would you recommend they spend money to seed?
I would say the most important thing is to find something you're passionate about. People do startups, and if you don't truly care about what you're doing, you're probably not going to succeed. With Grindr, Joel and I were both passionate about finding the gay guys around us and creating a transparent tool and mechanism to do that. And we also weren't afraid to take risks. For as much success we've had, there have also been some things that we were not quite happy with or more disappointed about. But the difference is trying out or taking those risks versus, sitting on your hands and saying, well, what would have happened if we had tried this? I think a lot of success is built within taking risks and being passionate and focused about what you're doing.
What one thing would you have done differently in the first 3 months if you had to do it all over again?
If I had to do it all over again, the timeline that brought us to where we are has, it's been about the journey, not the destination that we're at right now. So I don't think I would change much. If there was a lesson to be learned, I probably would have looked at ways of scaling our network in a way that was more responsive to our rapid growth. We do have 3.5 million users around the world, and very, very early on it became apparent that we weren't set up to handle the rapid scaling or the adoption rate with the gay guys who found out about Grindr. So that was a bit of an adventure and a bit of a struggle to figure out how to bring the back end up to speed so we could support all the new users on a daily basis, and also the engagement that the users have within the app. Our users spend, on average, about 1.5 hours per day. And if you look in the spectrum of how many hours you have to do stuff in the day, maybe you're awake for an average of 12 hours per day. So people are spending about 1.5 hours engaging in the app, and that leads to a lot of traffic. So going back to your original question, what would I have done differently? It's probably preparing ourselves for the amount of growth that we had.
Well, let's talk about the tech side
Sure.
a little as well. Do you think HTML5 is ever going to be strong enough to be able to do what you're doing with your native apps?
I don't know. Do you mean that with regards to desktop or mobile, or do
Mobile?
you think it
Just
matters?
LBS, for example. I mean,
So, first of all, as a geek, I think HTML5 is super exciting, and I wish there were more mainstream tools that facilitated development in HTML5. I know there are some cool things that have come out from Adobe and also from a few tech companies. So I think HTML5 is very cool. However, I think what's happened in the sort of mobile device arena, and this is largely because of Apple, but also because of Google, we've created an ecosystem and a culture where people ask what apps are in your phone, not websites that people ask what apps are on your phone, not what websites do you go to. And even if you have the greatest HTML5 website that's fully optimized for iPhone and Android, Windows Phone 7, BlackBerry, it doesn't really matter because the user still has to be conscious of opening up the browser on their phone, typing in the URL, and then somehow saving or remembering that URL on the phone. And I think that's a challenge. Whereas the ecosystem that Apple has created with the iTunes App Store is that you've got an easy way to discover apps that are probably going to be very compelling. And a few apps have tried to wrap components of HTML in sort of a shell that's available on the App Store. Some of them are very cool. I think there's still some performance gaps that have to be met with HTML5. As soon as you get into a debate of, iPhone versus Android and legacy devices, what do you support? HTML5 seems to require a lot of processing cycles on your mobile device. So as you get into older devices, the performance might not be up to par. So I think it's very cool, but I think we live in a world that is driven by app stores and the apps available in them.
And you're on Android, iPhone. Do you have a BlackBerry app?
We do have a BlackBerry
You
app.
do. What?
iOS, we do support iPad as well. We're on Android, and then we do have a BlackBerry app.
And how have you treated iPad differently?
How do we treat an iPad differently? Well, I think this is a credit towards Apple. Apple created the entire tablet market, right? Everybody had doubts, and there were a few attempts at it previously, but the iPad really defined it and said, "Hey, we think the tablet market is called iPad, and we think it's built with a specific screen resolution that will be maintained across all of our products that are in the iPad family." And therefore, developers have the opportunity to go and sort of create a unique experience for iPad versus iPhone. Whereas on the Android, you kind of get a big bucket of Android devices, and some of them are big and some of them are small. And the big versions, which may or may not be tablets, sometimes have smaller resolution screens than the smartphones. So Apple defined two very different categories of their mobile devices, whereas Android has sort of one big ecosystem of things that run their operating system. So with regards to Grindr, we've done some optimization on the iPad. We're always looking at ways to improve and cater to the tablet service and experience. And I think it just gives you more opportunities to interact with the content that you want. Namely, on Grindr, it's guys. So you have a bigger screen. There's more room to display information on the profile, and certainly at the end of the day, you see a much bigger, clearer picture of the person you're talking to on their profile.
Do you see much difference between the usage of people on Android versus the usage of people on the iPhone apps?
Because we were first to market with iPhone, I think that's certainly where our largest population is. But in terms of user engagement and people downloading, Android is catching up quickly simply because Android has matured a lot and become a lot more mainstream. I think the barrier to entry with Android is a lot lower than iPhone, simply because a lot of the devices are cheaper or given away, and therefore we still have more users on the iOS side. However, Android is catching up very quickly, and we're looking at ways to sort of take advantage of, what does an app experience mean to an Android user versus an iOS user, and how can we customize that experience so the Android users are happier with a more native experience on their devices.
Are you seeing iPhone monetizes a lot better than Android?
I think Apple has done a wonderful job in terms of monetization. It's certainly, at least initially, Apple was the first to market with an app store that included purchasing and also in-app purchases. So in terms of Grindr monetization, we do have healthy monetization across the board. But on iOS, it's very easy for you to go purchase your subscription credits, be it on Grindr or any other service, and make that sort of impulse buy and not worry about entering your credit card information.
Gotcha. So it's a lot more streamlined, basically, and
a single button versus 2 pages of entering information is a much better user experience.
yeah. So who else would you say is doing a good job in the mobile dating space?
Anybody who's in Google Play or on the iTunes App Store or even BlackBerry App World who has an app that's up there in terms of popularity, I think is doing a tremendous job. It's tough to get ranked very high. So in terms of specifics, just matters what tier you want to venture down. I mean, Facebook is obviously a leader in terms of social networking. Twitter, day in and day out, I get amazed by the amount of traffic and ingenuity that's going on with Twitter, whether it's their own client or third-party clients who are monetizing on the fact that people use Twitter but want a slightly different experience. If you look at the mobile dating space, I love Badoo. I think they have a tremendous product, a tremendous experience and interface. You look at Match.com and OkCupid, they've got some very cool, compelling interfaces and experiences as well. And I think that part of my job is to download apps daily and look at what the competition or the inspiration is doing and saying, that's an amazing idea. I wonder how they did that, or how does this apply to other sectors or demographics? Um, but yeah, I think everybody who's in the top rankings in the app stores, the proof is in the pudding, and by nature of the number of votes that they have or the number of daily downloads they have, they're all succeeding in some space.
The growth of mobile dating has been absolutely amazing over the last year or last several months. It just seems to be most top-tier dating sites are seeing 40 to 50% of their traffic on mobile now. How are you going to react to that? What's Grindr going to look like in a year's time? Where are you going to take Grindr, do you think?
So you're trying to peek into the crystal ball that I've got hidden behind me?
Philosophy. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, is that going to move you in a different direction? You're going to keep on doing the same thing and improving and growing, or is there any revelation with the growth of the competitive sphere around you?
So the competitive space is constantly growing and changing, both in the gay market and also the mainstream market. And I think whatever happens tomorrow happens tomorrow, and then we sort of any company adapts and responds and evaluates. With regards to Grindr, our single most important thing is to make our users happy. We've got a very large user base, and they're all fiercely loyal to the point where if something goes wrong or we do something that our user base doesn't like, they tell us about it and they're very vocal about it, but they don't leave us. And I think that's a very magical, important thing to have. So with regards to the future of Grindr, to me, the most important thing is to sort of take the loyalty and the monetization that our users give us and turn that around and develop new features and constantly improve the experience so that we can give it back to our users. Because at the end of the day, if we're trying to help gay guys meet each other, that better be one hell of an experience.
Great. Scott Lewallen, thank you so much for your time. You're the VP and SVP and co-founder of Grindr. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time talking with you.